Hi, everyone. Thanks for tuning in. My name is Sarah Preston. I'm an integrative health practitioner, fat loss coach, and I have Ali Damron with me today, and she's a hormone expert. She actually helps me with a lot of my testing and supplements, and just really helping women, especially women in perimenopause and menopause, to feel better and not have to deal so much with all of this craziness that is this transition to menopause. So today we're going to talk about the things that we all might be doing to really wreck our hormones, to screw up our hormones, to not support our hormones, and maybe how we can be more mindful of those things. So, Allie, I'm going to let you kick us off and we can get started.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so excited to be here today. So I talk about these things all the time, and I feel like honestly, our modern day culture doesn't do very many favors for our hormones, unfortunately. And so we kind of have to figure out what's going to help, what maybe I always like to say do an inventory, right? Of what's helping us in our life, what's maybe not so helpful. And I don't think we have to get rid of all of these things. I'm a very anti all or nothing type of practitioner, but there are certain things that we just do in our life and just kind of are on autopilot with that might be causing fatigue or insomnia or heavy periods or anxiety or digestive issues, just all kind of run of the mill things that women deal with and are kind of just frustrated by, don't really know what to do about, don't really know what practitioner to go to. So I'm a huge fan of looking at our lifestyle in general and just creating one that will be really supportive for health, hormones, and honestly, aging well and longevity too.
And doing it often, because we can tend to kind of, go back into old habits or get, lax in certain areas. And then we don't even realize that that could be the thing that is causing us to not feel our best.
Totally. Yeah, I think that too. And I think, we come from a culture, I think, of doing a lot of short-term things, and just kind of sprinting instead of making it be a marathon, right? And so I think that to some extent, especially in the conversation of perimenopause and menopause, that can be 2 to 12 years, right? Before menopause. And then we get into menopause and we all want to age well, I think, right? We all want to be able to move well and prevent disease and look our best and all of these different things. And so to some extent, I think that we have to find some joy in the process. It can't just be absolutely miserable, which I think is what a lot of even going back to our dieting days and stuff, a lot of those programs that you ate in containers or cut carbs completely or ate 1,200 calories, those were miserable. And we just kind of white knuckled it until we couldn't anymore. And so this is just about creating a really sustainable lifestyle for you that will be supportive. So we can go ahead and get into some of the good things, some of the bad things.
I think making, like you said, making it part of your lifestyle. I have people ask me all the time, like, well, what is the thing that really made the difference for you? And I want to list about 10. It's
Right.
like, it's not just this supplement or these tracking macros or this certain exercise or
Yeah.
whatever. It's a combination of creating a lifestyle that supports your hormones, that supports your healthy aging. So, and
Yeah.
it's not that you have to do all the things all the time, but what I always tell people, we're going to go over a list of things, and maybe that feels overwhelming. So you just start with one area. Like, what is the one area that needs the most improvement out of all these things?
Yeah, no, I highly agree with that. I think, when you look at Instagram, it looks like you're following coaches or practitioners that have it all together and have all this education. But I'm gonna speak for myself. It's taken me, and I'm by no means perfect. There are always intentions and things that I'm looking at in my own life of is this going well? What do I need to do about this? And what do I need to change here? But it's taken me 15 years to arrive at where I am today. Of really nailing these things down as habits, like steps and eating protein and strength training. Those things were not at all natural to me and things that I did, even not that long ago, right? So even in 2020 is when I started walking every day. I would work out, but I never worried about steps or movement or anything like that. And so it's just sort of like peeling layers off an onion, I think. And I think it's also just about being really intuitive and intentional with yourself of that inventory, like where do you need the most work? What would be the biggest dial movers? And I think to people, to your point of people asking that question of like, what's the biggest thing? I think that we sometimes want to like step over dollars to pick up pennies. We just want like the one magic strategy. And unfortunately, I didn't make the rules. I wish that there was that too, in terms of like a magic supplement or things like that. But even with supplements, there's just not. There's things that can help and things to support and correct imbalances, but it's never ever going to be a magic pill.
Yeah. And I think too, remembering like you and I have been doing this a long time. I recently posted a reel about doing like lymphatic drainage and sauna and rebounding, like, detox type stuff. And I was talking to some people and I just, they were kind of overwhelmed by that, or like, it's expensive. A sauna's expensive. I'm like, yeah, I wanted one for 5 years before I finally bought it. Like,
Yeah.
this isn't like, oh, I just started doing like all these things. It's like, again, the layers. Like I started out with the strength training and the walking, and then I kind of have built since then. And yeah, now I have a red light and a sauna, and I do some dry brushing and some lymphatic, but I didn't do that for the last 15 years.
Right, totally.
Yeah.
And I think also like looking at that and just kind of being like, so you've posted like your before and afters and your journey, you've been very transparent about that. And like, it wasn't the sauna that did it for you, right? Like you had done all of those other things first. And they're just like extra little layers, but there are like, and we can talk about it if you want to, but there are some absolute like foundational things that just need to be in place before we start worrying about the red light and the sauna and the supplements and all those different things that might
Yeah.
make like this much difference when some things can make like this much difference.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So if you want to go ahead and get
Yeah.
into it, we can start talking about them.
Okay, perfect. So I think that there are, I want to just kind of list some like common things that people think might even be healthy, that could be sort of screwing up the balance of hormones. So I first want to talk about, when we talk about hormones on the internet, everyone is using that word, but there are 50 different types of hormones, right? The 50 different ones. And so it's important to remember that all of these different hormones do different things. So when I'm talking about hormones, I first like to think about it as like a pyramid, and the very foundation of that pyramid, even in perimenopause, when estrogen and progesterone are on this big roller coaster, is to think about insulin, adrenaline, and cortisol. So cortisol is part of our sleep-wake cycle and our stress response. Adrenaline is that fight or flight response, and insulin is our blood sugar hormone. If those things are off, everything else is going to be worse. And I actually just posted a reel yesterday that was talking about how perimenopause and hormonal symptoms and metabolic diseases and cancers and all of these things seemingly are on a trend of in not a great place. And like we always want to question like why, right? And I think that so many of us are in fight or flight all the time. We're constantly stressed out, and we have a lot of metabolic disease happening with ultra processed foods. Again, the nervous system is an aspect to metabolic disease as well. Being really sedentary, not having muscle, like as we age, losing muscle mass. I think there's a lot of components to that. But I think if we can keep, or the healthier I will say that we can keep those three master hormones, that's going to really impact your estrogen, progesterone, testosterone as we even go through perimenopause and create less symptoms from that transition as well.
Yeah, I think you're right, though. People think, oh, my hormones are messed up or crazy, and they immediately, and because a lot of times, because it does happen during perimenopause, when, progesterone and estrogen are on influx, that's why they only think of those as the only hormones, because this is the time of life when those are, most talked about. But the three that you talked about are also harder to manage during this time of life too. I mean, we're, more insulin resistant, we're less stress resilient as we get into this age. So
yeah, I also like to just kind of remind people too that in general for people, this also tends to be the era of responsibility. Like we have so much on our plates, right? From careers and businesses to aging parents to raising families to marriages and mortgages, and just there's a lot going on. And, I think if we look at ourselves now compared to even when we had tiny babies, like that was really labor intensive, but the pressure now just feels a lot more for women in their 40s, I think,
Yeah. Yeah.
which is another aspect
But
of.
yeah, and it's hard because most will say, well, I can't do anything about that because I have to go
Yeah.
to work. I have to raise my teenagers. I have to take care of my parents. But it's how
Totally.
we manage it, right?
Right. So let's just start there. That was like kind of on one of my lists of things to talk about. So, one of the things about stress is that it is not about the stressor, it's about our perception of that. Right. And so, um, two people can go through the exact same situation and have a completely different response to it. And I think it matters, conditioning in our brain and how we were raised and our personality characteristics. If you're a little bit more type A, perfectionistic, people pleaser, like those things are obviously going to be the lens at which you view your life through. And so can kind of like raise the ante a little bit of all of these more stressful caretaking, people pleasing type of situations. And so I always say that, in my opinion, one of the biggest stressors, which stress absolutely impacts our estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, which is going to impact sleep and energy and mood and digestion and all of the different things that we symptomatically feel, is repressed emotions. We have been taught in our society to, like with anger, a lot of women are like, oh, just be grateful for what you have, or just get over it, or just stop thinking about that, or just, this isn't that big of a deal. And we feel so uncomfortable by feeling this discomfort of these emotions that we will do anything to get rid of it, whether that is, like I said, gaslight ourselves, but drink alcohol, shop, eat,
Scroll.
over exercise, scroll, gossip, like whatever, we will find a way to get out of that discomfort. And those repressed emotions, if we're unwilling to process anger, grief, worry, sadness, fear, resentment, any of those things, that really tells your brain that this is a dangerous, scary world for you, that these emotions that we are experiencing on a daily basis that are a normal part of the human experience are really traumatic and really threatening to us. And so it dials up that fear response significantly. So if we can just, I always tell this to my patients, especially ones who have trouble sleeping, have low energy, have chronic pain, autoimmune disease, anxiety, depression, those types of things, like let's actually start checking in with ourselves at least once a day. And hopefully we can do that and be better about doing it in real time as well. But check in and see, like, what are you actually feeling? So many of us are just on autopilot where we just like shove them down and keep moving forward. But I do really think that that is a huge reason for such nervous system dysregulation that we're having in our society. And if we can just be real with what truly the state of things are, that will help actually calm your nervous system down. I
Yeah,
think a lot of people,
talking about it with somebody or writing it down, right? Or having a cry, like after you have a good cry, you know how good that you feel, and then
so
it's
good.
just like
Yes,
you're like the
yes,
weight was
like
lifted.
process it. Yes.
Yeah,
And I think that, everyone's on Instagram is now talking about nervous system regulation. And I think people assume that when your nervous system is regulated, that you're like calm and stoic all the time and you're never anxious and you like have it all together. But it actually more means like accepting what is. So if we're angry, if we're sad, if we're fearful, we're whatever, anxious, like accepting what is much more soothing for our nervous system. So I think that is a really, really big place to start with so many women, and men too, to be honest, and
I
honestly too.
I stopped. I I think I have one child who cries about a lot of things, and I and my other kids and myself would tell them to just stop crying. Like you don't need to cry about that. And I kind of stopped saying that because I realized how that sounded. Like maybe that he's an emotional person and he just needs to like get it out, you know?
Yeah,
So
I
like
know.
not telling them, but maybe rather giving them, just ways that they can express it without, completely having a meltdown. Obviously, I mean, they're getting older now. It's not like they're 2-year olds, but sometimes that's just how they deal with things.
Yeah. So I have a fifth grader and it's really funny. He plays basketball and baseball, and I have a second grader too, and his team does not do this, but these two teams that he's on, if we don't have two kids crying every single game, it is like just an anomaly. Like I don't think it's ever happened. they just sob, they
Yeah,
cry, and
yeah.
they just lose their minds. And so even just like the other night, my son came home from a baseball game and he didn't play his best and he was really wanted to win this game. He was super disappointed. He was like, well, it was so and so's fault, and like just completely putting it on somebody else. And I was like, okay, so here's the thing. You can't deal with like this disappointment that feels really uncomfortable to you.
Yeah.
And so you're a kid, so you're gonna like blame other people, or you're gonna like internalize it like I'm the worst, I suck, like all these things. But it really is just about that feels crappy. It feels hard to deal with, but it is just like normalizing that disappointment is a normal human experience.
Yeah, yeah. And it's really not, not that it's not a big deal, because it is a big deal to you in the moment, but sometimes
Yeah.
it's just reminding you that it's like, it's okay to feel this way. This, this is how I'm gonna feel, and I know it's gonna get better, but it's
Yeah.
it's
Yep.
hard. I mean, and then especially when you're like constantly thinking of that in your mind, then you're like reeling from it and you can't get over it, you
I,
know?
I know. I know. I think that in today, I think we're doing a much better job with like emotional intelligence and teaching people how to process things and how to deal with things. But it has not been a part of our repertoire ever, really. It's been stop crying, get over it, stop being mad, stop having that temper tantrum. It's been like diagnosing people with anxiety and depression when sometimes life is depressing, or sometimes you're really sad about situations, and sometimes you're really scared about life. And that would be a normal reaction to things,
Yeah,
you
yeah,
know?
yeah.
Sometimes we just don't normalize stuff enough, I think.
Yeah, and I sometimes I even catch myself saying like, I know I shouldn't feel this way, but this is
Yeah,
how I feel, or I just, which shouldn't say that. Like you can feel however you want to feel, and that's, yeah, it's normal, but
it's
it is
hard. We've all
hard though. It's hard. It's not an easy. And then so then, what else do you just keep like doing those things day after day until it becomes easy?
Yeah, I mean, it really is. It's this idea of like neuroplasticity where we learned, right? Like, especially some of those societally unacceptable things like caregiving, aging parents, right? Like, that feels hard sometimes. It feels like there can be a lot of stress and a lot of anger and frustration. And that feels like you're not supposed to feel that way, right? You're not supposed to feel that way toward your kids. You're supposed to be loving and caring and nurturing. And when you have some of these like emotions, you're like, wow, that feels really threatening toward this person. We tend to, our brain interjects and says, nope, you shouldn't feel like that. Why would you feel like that? You're a bad person for feeling this way. And so I think it just comes down to like honestly honoring your truth.
Yeah.
Just because you feel a certain way doesn't mean that you don't love that person anymore, that you hate them, etc. There can be two truths to everything, that both can be true, that you're frustrated and mad and resentful and angry at them, but you still love them more than anything.
Yeah.
And I think that we sometimes don't realize that we can have those nuances and that we can have more than one truth.
Yeah.
But I do think that it is practicing it over and over and over. And when you do go to a place of gaslighting yourself or shaming yourself for feeling a certain thing, just realizing like you immediately had that biological reactions. Emotions have biology, they have feelings. And so just kind of honoring the fact that this is what I felt. There's nothing wrong with it. I always just tell my patients to like identify and validate what we feel and let it be there, and it will process faster. I think if we have those reactions whether we want to or not, and so we can either repress them and create symptoms, or overeating or drinking or numbing or some of the more self-sabotaging behaviors, or even like physical pain, anxiety, sleeplessness, those types of things. Or we can choose to just kind of learn that that is okay.
Yeah.
So it's gonna kind of be there one way or the other, I think, is what we're not really realizing.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think that's one of my first things to work on with people, especially if they come up with certain hormonal imbalances like low progesterone or low testosterone, high cortisol. Like there's some stressy sort of labs showing. I
Mhm.
always am like, okay, let's do like a little bit of an inventory. Let's figure out where the stress is actually coming from,
Yeah.
and starting on like, whatever it looks like, but that could be part of the process.
Yeah. And especially, like you said, we're so busy that I think taking inventory of our daily activities and what we're saying yes to. And it's hard to say no to things or, to prioritize one thing over another, but we have to remember like our health is literally depending on it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I know. It's been a big, I'm a people pleaser. And I always did everything for the school and like said yes to everybody else and just wore myself ragged. And it's really actually this whole year, I've had some other like personal stuff come up where it's just taken a lot of energy from me. And so I've been like, I can't just give to the school all the time. And it's been so hard, but I've really had to like try to like the things that people ask me to do that I'm like, yes, I love to do that. That sounds really fun. I've like moved toward that. But the things I'm like, I don't
Yeah.
want to do that, but I should. Like, I've really tried, and it's been so hard to break some of that conditioning.
Yeah, I know. But then you're so glad afterwards that you said no.
Yeah, I know.
I'm not doing that.
I know. I have like this savior complex where I'm like, I have to go save the school and no one else is
Yeah.
going to do it. I need to go help. But yeah, it just, I don't have enough capacity for all of the things anymore. I still do what I can, but yeah, it's hard.
Yeah. Yeah.
All right, let's talk about some other ones. So in terms of nutrition, I think there's some certain things that can help our hormones a lot with nutrition. I think there's some things that can be a little bit more damaging. So even when we just go back to the cortisol part of things and the insulin part of things, so I think things that can be helpful, especially if you notice that you're in kind of a state of dysregulation where like your sleep and wake cycle, so energy, sleep is not in a great place, your anxiety is not in a great place, you're feeling really burnt out, just kind of some of those stressy type stuff, eating in regular intervals is important. Our body does run on a biological clock. And I think setting the stage in the morning with stability with insulin and blood sugar by eating a good amount of protein, like eating food before you drink a whole bunch of coffee, starting your day with hydration, like that can just really set the stage for more stability in both blood sugar regulation and like those fluctuations and cortisol too. And so I think everyone's a little bit different here and has a little bit different constitution and stress level and lifestyle and all those things. And so I don't think that it needs to be said, like you have to eat in 30 minutes of waking up. Everyone, has to do that. But I do think that looking at yourself, honoring your hunger cues, like if you are, I used to do this. So I used to like not eat forever and drink a bunch of coffee. And I used to be so anxious, just like let everything rev up. And I was just like sitting there working and like just so jittery and anxious. And I was like, okay, so obviously like this isn't working great. Like, let's maybe reconsider. And so I think it's about listening to biofeedback there and just honoring like your truth again. Like, do you respond well to this? Do you not? How do you feel? Are you sleeping well? I always say in terms of nutrition, looking at hunger, energy, cravings, mood, and sleep. If all 5 of those are in a good place, probably what you're doing is in a good place. If one or more of those things are off, likely a few of them will be off. We probably need to go back to the drawing board and look at fiber, protein, healthy fats, eating schedule, like caffeine consumption. Something in there is probably not serving you super well.
Yeah. I'm bad about drinking coffee first. I'm just
Mhm.
not, I don't know. I just love that like
I
warm
know.
coffee before I do anything, before I'm like
Yeah, I
doing
know.
fixing any food or
Yeah.
oh
I do too. And I still, so kind of my new pattern, and this has been, so when I was doing that, I was like really in an anxious, like stressy type of place. It was actually when I first started my business. And had like littler kids and stuff. So I feel much more regulated now. And I think you might even notice on a daily basis, like even with fasting, if you like Sundays for me, I can tend to fast a lot longer. I don't go like super long, but I just like it's a slower morning. I'm not like doing a whole bunch of stuff. I'm not amped up in the morning. And so just naturally like I don't feel like food. I can sit and like drink water, drink coffee, and do fine. But days that I'm like really amped up and I've worked out at 5 a.m. and stuff, like I tend to get food on board a little bit earlier. But I think so now I wake up and get ready in the bathroom. So I'm not even downstairs to get coffee. Otherwise, I definitely would love to. So I have my water bottle that I had by my night table. So I just drink water first and then I go make coffee and then I will um put some collagen in it. And actually, I will say I think the collagen helps with the jitteriness a bit.
mhm.
So I do that. I put a little tiny bit of creamer in there and I'm okay for a little bit. And then I'll eat a little while later, like
Yeah.
an hour or so later. It's not super long, but it's also not immediately either.
Yeah. I cut back to 1/3 caffeine coffee.
Yeah.
The Purity
Yeah.
has the 1/3 caffeine
That's
coffee.
all.
So well, first I started with half calf. I was just mixing together, caffeinated and decaf. Now they have a 1/3 caffeinated. So I don't even like notice it. I don't even doesn't bother me, or I don't feel tired or like I need the caffeine. I just really
Yeah,
like the taste of coffee.
I know. I actually do half calf a good amount of the time too.
Yeah.
Like I said, I'm more sensitive to caffeine in general. I don't like love the feeling of just amping up. So yeah, I love half calf, but
And
I
now
still
when
make
I drink Starbucks, like if we're on vacation or something, I have like regular coffee, then I do feel
oh,
like a
I
little
know.
jittery. And I'm like, oh, this is like a weird feeling just because I'm not used to it.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. No, I feel the same way. If I like at Starbucks, I'll order like a misto, which is like half. And that feels pretty good for me. But if I ordered like a black coffee from Starbucks and even drank a tall, I would be
Yeah.
amped and not in a healthy way. Like, so anyway, so I think, that's kind of like setting the stage. I think, low carb dieting all the time, can start to impact our conversion of thyroid hormones, can make people feel just not great. Like sleep can be impacted, energy can be impacted. Some people get headaches or nausea with it. Um, I think everyone has, again, this is a really nuanced thing. Everyone has like their own sort of level of carbohydrates of like what's low carb versus high carb for them. And it's not just a, set in stone thing for all people. It depends on your age, height, weight, sex. It depends on your muscle mass, your activity level, how well you metabolize carbohydrates, how insulin sensitive you are. So I think that's a huge range for women. And I think you just kind of have to feel again, where does all of those things feel the best for you? Do you feel puffy? Do you feel bloated? Do you feel water retention? If you do, maybe back off a little bit, especially looking at the source of carbohydrates too. So get fruits and vegetables, rices, quinoas, potatoes even, but ultra processed food's going to definitely jump up those carbohydrates a lot and make us feel more water retention and puffiness and bloating and things like that too.
Yeah. I get asked about bloating all the time. And I know it's so
Oh,
like could be so many different things. It's so hard to know, but
yeah,
just
I know.
paying attention more to, I mean, obviously in a perfect world, we're all eating just like all whole foods and, but we know that's not always life either. So
It's not for me either. I don't think, like I said, I'm not an all or nothing type of practitioner. I occasionally have to go out to eat, have to eat some processed foods. Like
yeah.
I choose the best I can, but that's kind of what it is.
Yeah.
Um, for bloating, I actually start with people, like the first question I ask is how they eat. So if you eat fast, multitasking, when you're stressed out all the time, swallowing a bunch of water or liquid, that usually is especially if people are just bloated every day. They don't know what foods do it, they're just bloated. Um, I think a lot of times it has to do with how you're eating and like the nervous system part of things. So I like to start there, like to start with some digestive bitters. So apple cider vinegar or dandelion, fennel, ginger, like just some digestive type herbs and foods. And that does a lot for a lot of people.
And sitting down and having like a meal, it's like we don't even hardly eat as a family half the time because we're running around and trying to grab food here and there. If you're always on the go, which a lot of people are,
I
that
know.
can happen. Yeah.
I know. Sometimes I look at life and I'm just like, part of it is so enjoyable to watch my kids play sports. It is like one of my very favorite things, honestly. But sometimes I'm like, how did we get here
Yeah.
as a society? Like, why is it like this?
Yeah. And I have
Like
friends,
tonight.
I have like some friends that have kind of adopted a new lifestyle, I guess, where they're like living on the land, they're like they're
Oh,
like, they have a chickens and they're like, they're homeschooling their kids and they're home all the time and they're baking sourdough bread and they're,
I
and it's
know.
like somebody else had said it's like the Laura Ingalls Wilder days. Like that's what and sometimes I'm kind of jealous. I'm like, wow, that seems amazing.
Uh-huh. I know. I
I don't know
am
if I
just,
could ever do it, but I think it looks like such a peaceful, I mean, I'm sure it's not always peaceful, but it seems like just such a great existence to be in.
I know. No, I feel the same way sometimes too. Um, okay, so we talked about low carb dieting, highly processed foods, alcohol. Alcohol also is a super nuanced conversation. I think you can have some alcohol in moderation, which everyone's like, what's moderation? I would say probably 1 to 2 a week is like probably the max. I think also, always going on the lesser side is always going to be better for hormones and sleep and mood and all of those different things. But I think we can be realistic that some people enjoy it. That's the way they socialize or whatever. So 1 to 2 a week, I think is fine. But I do think over that, I mean, we increase our risk of breast cancer, and certain other cancers. It impacts our sleep, it impacts our cortisol, it impacts our hormones, our blood sugar. I think if we're honest with ourselves, it really doesn't make most 40-year-olds feel very good.
Yeah. Yeah,
Um,
definitely.
yeah.
I don't think we can process it as well. I mean, I don't know if that's a fact, but it just seems like,
Oh my gosh, it does seem like, yeah. I have so many people. I mean, yeah, I struggle with like even one. I can tell that I've drank one
yeah,
glass of alcohol. Yeah.
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 It's, I don't know if it's just like your liver is trying to process so many things, or what it is, but it just seems like, and tons of women tell me the same thing. They're like, why am I all of a sudden waking up at 3 a.m. with, night sweats when I drink, or, I have such a terrible hangover the next day, or brain fog. And I never used to be like this. I used to be able to drink, go out and drink several drinks in a night. Now you did that, you're like,
I know.
doesn't
I
work.
think it's probably, I think it's our livers have a big job with all the toxins we're exposed to. And I think also like nutrient deficiencies. So like B vitamins, magnesium, choline, glycine, amino acids, those are all cofactors to how the liver works. And I think metabolically speaking, a lot of us are just not in the best place. I think there's some insulin resistance. I think,
Yeah,
there's just things going on for all of us. And I just think that it doesn't feel good
it's
anymore.
worse.
Mhm. Um, speaking of that, I guess like endocrine disrupting chemicals, fragrances, parabens, phthalates, things like that. I know the whole non-toxic conversation can feel really overwhelming. And sometimes it even does for myself too. When you think about all the things that you're exposed to all day long, and you hear people on the internet talking about, how toxic our world is and stuff. Be honest, like it still makes me really anxious. I'm like, oh
Yeah.
my God. So
Plastic is in everything. Like plastic is in the meat that I get. Like, it's frozen in my freezer. Like there's plastic everywhere. It's
I
like,
actually just read an article that meat has one of not one of the highest, but there are microplastics in meat.
yeah,
There are microplastics in our snow.
yeah,
Like, what are you gonna do? It's just everywhere. Yeah, it's in all the food containers, like even the like better brands and things like that. A lot of them still use plastic to wrap their foods and stuff. But so I think the best we can do is like the best we can do. I think looking at your cooking surfaces, so your pots and pans, trying to get more non-toxic versions of those instead of Teflon. I think when you can store your food in glass, great, do that. Or like paper, things like that. I think personal care products, like when one thing runs out, try to find, use the Think Dirty app. We really are, in my career in 12 years, there's been just a massive shift in that. Some of it is greenwashed for sure. That is like still not the best, but pretends to be.
yeah.
But there are a lot of amazing, ethical, great brands in food and makeup and hair care and lotions and cleaning products, laundry, all of those things that are trying to do the right thing by the environment and our health by trying to get rid of some of that stuff. So I do think that there are tons and tons of options. And I think you don't have to just hear this today and throw everything away. Just switch when you can, in a budget friendly way. And I also think just using whole food nutrition and just supporting our detox pathways. Like, I mean, we kind of talked about the sauna, red light, dry brushing, walking is great. Strength training is great. Moving your body. There's certain herbs and things like that, like dandelion root tea or chlorella is a really great option of a
A lot of
supplement.
water, a lot more water, and
Yeah, sweat.
yeah,
We do have detox pathways, making sure your bowel movements are good, things like that. And I think that that's all we can do right now. Like, I really do think that that's where we're at.
yeah. It's there's so much you can do, and you can go down a rabbit hole of like every single ingredient that's on your deodorant and your hair, your shampoo and whatever, but it's just then you just feel like a crazy person. So
You do. And you still, even with like the non-toxic versions, like you still don't even know what that stuff is. Like everyone's like, well,
yeah,
just get stuff you can pronounce. Like even in non-toxic hair care, I don't know what any of it is.
yeah,
I have to like look it up and yeah. So I've walked myself back over the last decade significantly from that conversation. I was really, really scared when I was in acupuncture school and there was a lot of talk around that. And I got to a point where I was making almost every product and I had babies, I was pregnant then, and it was crazy. And my husband is very much not that way. And so we sort of like it just didn't jive. You know what I mean? It just didn't
yeah.
work. And then I started, I mean, even from like a nervous system perspective, just really like ramping up my nervous system because I was scared of literally the world, like just terrified of anything I put in my kids' mouths or bodies or myself or all the things. And it's just not helpful.
Yeah. Yeah. You got to live your life too, but be mindful of it. But yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all we can do at this point. And then I think, getting sleep, obviously like poor sleep, exposure to a lot of blue light before bed, just that's a tough one for a lot of people. Trying to do your best with setting the phone down in a way. Research has 90 minutes. I feel like that is an absolute really tall order for most people. I would say 30 minutes if we can do that. Like, let's start there.
Yeah.
And the same thing in the morning, like try not to roll over, which I am totally guilty of.
I'm
It's
terrible. That's my new thing is I'm trying not to. I look at my phone for like anything emergency, like, because I turn it off in airplane mode and put it across the room. But once I get up in the morning, the first thing I'm like looking at my phone. And so I look at it, I'm going to try to just look at it for anything that emergency, like if we have a school delay or if,
yeah.
there was any kind of email, like just glance at things for 2 minutes to make sure there's nothing that I need to know right away or need to take care of right away. And then take 30 minutes. Like I'm starting small. Like let's just do 30 minutes where I'm like getting this kids off to school, maybe doing like my prayer or whatever before I go
Hmm.
down the rabbit hole of,
I
my
know.
phone.
I know. I know. It's just so addictive. It's so hard. And it's so hard when like your school notifications are on the same place that you work. And like
Yeah.
it's
Yeah.
just really, really a blurry line there. And it's really hard to set boundaries around that. But I do. Like that's been one of the things in my own life. We kind of talked about like layers of things, of having healthy technology. And I think one of the motivators for me is that my fifth grader, we're trying to teach him healthy tech boundaries. He doesn't have a cell phone yet, and he really wants one. And I'm like, I can't be like just zoned out to this while I'm telling you not to be.
Yeah. I know.
That's been a motivator for me too.
And then it says your screen time on your phone. Like I tell my kids, like, you had 2 hours of screen time today. Why were you on your phone for 2 hours? And they're like, let's see your screen time, mom. And I'm like, well, I work on my phone. So, but still,
But
it's still really bad. It's still really bad. So,
then for me, like I've had to be really honest, and I'm like, are you working or
right.
is it personal use? Because the
Yes.
line is like not really different. You know what I
Especially when
mean?
you work on social media. So you can use all your social media time is considered work, but it's not all work. So,
You get sucked down a rabbit hole every
yeah.
time you're on there for sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's been a big one for me that I have let go for years at this point and not really paid attention to while I was trying to eat more protein and trying to strength train better and walk and do all these other things. But it's a place that I don't know, I collectively think social media is not doing helpful things for our mental health and our sleep. And it's not all evil for sure. I work on there and I love it, but we need some boundaries with it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. So that's kind of
It's
some of
hard though. It's addictive, just like it literally is. It's like an addictive substance.
it is.
You're
It
like
will
used
give
to the
you a great
notifications.
dopamine.
I'm trying to turn off all notifications too on my phone, except for like text and stuff like
Okay.
that. But any things I don't need to be notified by immediately, I try to turn those off, because just that constant like picking it up. I mean, if you look at it, your phone will tell you like how many times a day you picked it up. It can be like 100. And I'm like, I literally picked up my phone 100 times. Like it's gross.
I know. I think that a lot of people will use it as a dopamine hit. And there's a book that's called Dopamine Nation that talks about just all the easy dopamine that we can get. And we used to have to work for dopamine a bit better. And that's a healthier like brain chemistry for us, where now, if you get a like that's a little bit of dopamine hit for you and a little bit of validation. And so I have that book was really, really eye-opening and interesting. But I do think that we just get dopamine way too easy now, which is creating instant gratification. And our kids, like, my kids don't even know what life is without Amazon Prime or getting information now and getting what they need immediately.
Yeah,
And I don't think that's such a great thing for you.
I know. I know. I was even just talking to my older kids last night, and we're talking about careers and just like jobs and making certain, salaries. And I was like, just so you know, like when your dad and I started, like when we were 23 years old and we started working, we made this amount of money. Like it doesn't happen. I know you think that, everything happens right away, but you're going to be in a job where you're like the little peon. You just have to,
Keep
you have to
working.
know that you got to work for this. It's going to take years to get to this point. So,
I know. And I think even for them, like they're just like, oh, just have like a post go viral. Like
yeah,
you
right. Like it's just
like,
that
well,
easy.
Instagram has to really like you to have that.
Right.
Like something,
Yeah,
all the stars have to align here. So
right. Exactly.
good luck.
Yeah.
But yeah, so I don't know. I think those are, sometimes I talk to women all the time about their hormones, obviously, and I just do a lot of like self-reflection and try to just figure out like where we're at, what we're doing and what's helping and what's not. And I just feel like that was kind of some things that I had thought about that I feel like I talk about the most with women in terms of things to watch for.
And there is a lot that we can do, on our own and with our lifestyle that makes a difference. I mean, again, back to the conversation of, supplements, and like, of course there's like HRT, and there's definitely other things, but um we have control over some of it. It might feel at this time in our life like everything is so out of control and we don't have control over our hormones. Like it's just like, this is how it is. And, this is the craziness, and we can blame it on menopause and the transition to menopause. But the truth is that there are, we do have control over some of it. Maybe not all of it, but some of it.
Absolutely. Yeah, no, I think that too. And I think hopefully people will come away with a more like empowered message of like all the things that we do actually have control over. I do think that unfortunately, and I hate to say it this way, but I do think that if you're a little bit more on autopilot and just kind of like going with the flow, like these things that we've talked about that are healthy for hormones, you have to kind of fight for them a little bit. You know what I mean? Like restaurant food and portions are huge, and it's really easy to be sedentary all day. And a lot of women don't love to like strength train and push themselves that hard, which I get, it's hard. And we're kind of wired to not push ourselves like that. The social media, like we talked about, it's really easy to just let it take us over. But I think, like I said, just start small, start with like one thing that you feel like would be a really, really great dial mover for you, depending on what symptoms or what hormonal imbalances you have. And just really make like that one thing a priority and see what changes with that, and then the next thing, and then the next thing. And I think, after time, you'll create like a really, really great healthy lifestyle.
I was thinking about that this morning because, well, with my clients, they're tracking macros, and I had a little conversation about how you don't have to track macros forever. I mean, it doesn't have to be forever. But then this morning I was thinking like, we have this lifestyle is forever. Like the lifestyle that we're living is gonna, unfortunately, we don't have the, luxury of just like, and not that all of us did this, but just eating whatever we want and doing whatever we want, maybe like when we were younger. We do have to be more intentional now if we want to feel good and be active as we age. It's unfortunately, it's not just, okay,
Yeah.
take this pill, or, okay, I'm lucky because I, don't have to do those things. You can look at it either way. It can be unfortunately or fortunately, we have the ability and we're empowered to do these things. We have the ability to help ourselves feel better and age well. We have that power.
Yeah,
Um, but
totally.
it can be kind of like, oh man, I got to do all this stuff the rest of my life. Well, yeah, I mean,
Yeah, I know. I do say that to people all the time with every single thing that we talked about. Like there is no arrival. And
yeah,
that was a really interesting thing for myself, even too. Like I've been open about my journey with anxiety. Like I just was like, I want to get rid of my anxiety, or I want to lose this weight, or I want to build muscle right now. But like you have to where you got to help those things, you have to continue to do those things forever. And
yeah,
so, that's kind of a part of a larger conversation, that you start small, make it palatable so that you can build on it. And to some extent, what you're doing has to feel good enough to do forever. It
yeah,
can't be something that like you're not willing to do forever.
yeah. And that's same with like maintenance when it comes to weight
Yeah.
loss. It's
Mhm.
like sometimes
To
that's harder
it
than
is.
actual like getting to that point, because you have to keep going and you have to find a way to make it work with your life. Like you have to, you know,
Mhm.
and then other things come up, same with like hormones, and there's going to be new symptoms that come up or new things, and you kind of have to tweak things, or try out some new things to help with that. But yeah, so it's a lifelong thing. And same, both of us have been doing this forever, and we're not, we're still doing new things and still continuing
Yeah.
to better ourselves, still trying to learn and trying to change habits, like talking about the phone and changing the morning habit. It's like we're still trying to always, make progress toward, just bettering ourselves just a tiny bit. It
Mhm.
doesn't have to be a complete life overhaul at one time, just trying to, take those baby steps.
I think one thing that helps with that is kind of getting out of like I think specifically with weight loss, but even with like mental health and anxiety and things like that, like I'm going to go to the therapist for a few sessions and like just get through this. Like you don't have to go to therapy forever by any stretch, but just like you don't have to track macros forever. But I do think finding a different goal, like the goal can't always just be to like lose weight. Like it helped me a lot to realize that in my life, I have not witnessed people age well, like really at all in my family. And so I have started to realize, like, if I want to change that script for myself, like, I'm going to need to do different things than everyone else around me has done. And it's helped me to settle in a little bit better instead of just like, okay, I got to do this like 6 week lifting program or whatever. Like, it's never going to end. And you can, do progressive overload and continue to beat yourself and progress and things like that. Even maintain is still a huge goal, like you said, but I think switching the goal into like, it's not that you have to get better because you're bad now. It's just like Sarah and I are saying, this phone is not serving us in any way. It
Yeah.
doesn't serve me in any single way possible. Looking at it at 5 a.m. like makes my cortisol just like jam out first thing in the morning and get all this dopamine and things that I don't need. And so I think it's just about like what is actually serving you, what's making your life better, what's enhancing you, what's this like joy in life that you're going to, and what are things that you're maybe not going toward anymore. Aging well, thinking about 3 generation or 3 decades down the road, 2 decades, like how do you want to be? How do you want to show up? I just think it's got to be a larger conversation than just like right now I want to fit into my pants.
Yeah, but preventative is harder to maybe
Yeah.
like, you know, get you motivated than fitting in
Yeah.
those pants. It's like
Right.
right
Totally.
now, well, again, it's that immediate gratification that we talked about that, but overall, I mean, I guess you can probably have a little of both. Like,
And I think
we
you
all want to
absolutely
look good
can.
and whatever, but also hopefully, the bigger picture in mind.
I certainly still have aesthetic goals. I think there's nothing wrong with that at all. But I
Yeah.
think, um, for
For longevity purpose or for making it last a long time, there has to be a bigger reason why you're doing it.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Well, this was awesome, Allie. Where can they find you online?
Um, so I am online pretty much everywhere. I have a YouTube channel at Ali Damron. I have a podcast called The Ali Damron Show, Instagram, same handle, and a podcast called The Ali Damron Show.
And then you have a website. I send people sometimes just to
I
your
do.
website,
Yeah, yeah. So I have a
alliedamron.com.
website.
And she
Mhm.
does free 15-minute consults. I tell people that all the time. Like if you're struggling with something and you're like, I don't know if she can help me or not, she can
Yeah,
get on the phone with you too. So if you need more individualized help, that's a great place to go. So
thank
thank
you.
you so
Yeah,
much for
thank
being
you. I appreciate
here.
it.
Appreciate it.